1 Samuel chapter 5, we're about to get out of this chapter. I just want you to remember what's happened so far. God here, Yahweh, I always call God Yahweh because when Moses asked God, let me back up. When God spoke to Moses in the burning bush incident in Exodus chapter 3, God told Moses, you go back to your people Israel in Egypt and you tell Pharaoh that it's time to let my people Israel leave Egypt. But you have to go to your people first and tell the Jews that God has met with you, the God of the Hebrews, and He has said it's time to leave Egypt. And Moses said, perhaps they won't believe me, Lord, and they'll ask me, what is the name of the God who sent you? What am I to tell them? What is your name? And in Exodus chapter 3, God said, you tell them that I am who I am. You tell them that I am sent you. He names Himself. God calls Himself when He says I am. It's the verb ehyeh. It means I am. When God speaks to man, to Moses, He said I am the ever-existent one. I've always existed. I always will exist. I need nothing else to exist. I am self-existing and always will be. It's not that I was or that I am or that I will be. I am is enough because I'll always be the same. When I look down to man, I tell you I am. When you look back up to me, you call me Yahweh, which means He is. God looks down to man and says, I am. Man in response looks up at God and says, yes, indeed, you are. He is the ever-existing one. So that's why I always call God Yahweh. In case you're wondering, what is this name? It's the name that God named Himself. He said, this will be my memorial name with Israel. When I enter into contract, covenant, agreement, when I make an agreement with men, I will name myself Yahweh. It's as if on a contract, both parties of the agreement sign here. Abraham would have signed Abraham, and God would have signed Yahweh, because that's the name He enters into covenant with man. He goes by several other names, El Shaddai, El Gibor. We could go over the names of God. You've seen posters of the names of God and the names of Christ. He goes by several titles, character titles, but this is the name that He told Moses He would go by, He would be known by. When Israel asks you who sent you, you tell them, I am sent you. We call Him Yahweh. He is. He who is. So that's what's going on here. Yahweh, as the King of Israel, has entered into battle with, or the Israelites have entered into battle with the Philistines. The Israelites are not doing well in this period of their history. They're not worshiping Yahweh the way they should. That covenant agreement that they made with Yahweh through Moses at Mount Sinai, the 10 Commandments, the Mosaic Law, they're not adhering to that. They're not worshiping Yahweh the way they should. And they go into battle because God has brought the Philistines against Israel. And so they go into battle, and Israel's leaders, after losing 4,000 men, think we need a leg up in this battle. We need to go back to the Philistines in battle, but we need a lucky charm. We need a rabbit's foot. We need something to take into battle that will maybe secure the victory. We can't keep losing thousands of men. And so they decide to take the Ark of the Covenant. That golden box, wooden acacia box, overlaid with gold, in which God told the Jews, you put the table of the law, you put the Mosaic Law, the tablets that Moses brought down from the mountain, you put them in that ark. They have taken this ark out of its holy place in the tabernacle and have carried it into battle. And God, in His disgust, allowed the Philistines to kill yet another 30,000 Jews on that day. I won't be used like this. They didn't want Yahweh to fight their battle for them. They just wanted the lucky charm. As it turns out, Yahweh allows the Philistines, these Gentiles that do not worship Him, He allows them to capture the Ark of the Covenant, and the holiest bit of religious furniture that's ever existed on earth, the Ark of the Covenant, is taken into Gentile territory where Yahweh is not worshipped. And that's what happens here. The Ark of the Covenant of God is in Philistine cities. Just to get us back on track here, we see in 1 Samuel chapter 5, verse 6. Come on. This is what it says: the hand of the Lord was heavy on the Ashdodites. Remember, there were 5 main cities of Philistia, and this was one of them, Ashdod. And when the Philistines captured the ark, I mean, they won the battle. They captured everything. They got all the booty, the loot from the battle. The Ark of the Covenant was one of those things they captured. They had to put it somewhere. So they brought it back into the land of Philistia, and they put it in the city of Ashdod. And Yahweh said, I'm not going to have this. So Yahweh started to demonstrate His sovereignty over the Gentile nations. It says, now the hand of the Lord, that's Yahweh. Whenever you see the Lord, the word Lord in the Bible, all capitalized, all 4 letters capitalized, that is the name Yahweh. Now the hand of Yahweh was heavy on the Ashdodites, and He ravaged them and smote them with tumors, both Ashdod and its territories. So it wasn't just inside the city of Ashdod, but it was all around this Philistine area that these tumors came on people. It says He ravaged and smote them. He struck them with these tumors to get their attention. He could have killed them, right? But this is a gracious God who desires that all men be saved and come to the knowledge of the truth. This is a God who's presenting Himself before the Philistines as the God, the Creator God, greater than all their false gods. This is grace. Just gives them an illness. So Ophel is the word O-P-H-E-L, Ophel, for this word tumors here. And it means boil. You may have in your New King James Version or your King James Version, if you have that Bible, the word emerald, which is a shortening of the word hemorrhoid. That's what this is. It's a hemorrhoid. So these hemorrhoids were spread throughout the city of Ashdod. They were spread to the territories around the city of Ashdod, and they were carried by mice. We'll read today that this illness was spread throughout the territory by mice, much like the bubonic plague. We talked about the bubonic plague last time for just a minute, and it was carried by mice and transferred from person to person by the fleas that were carried also on the mice. That's what's going on here. So Yahweh has inflicted these Philistines with hemorrhoids and other type groinal sores, boils of the groin. This is nasty, and how much more personal can you get? That's how God is getting the attention of the Philistines. And as we'll read later in a minute, some of these boils, these hemorrhoids, are actually so severe that some people are dying from them. But what happens is the Philistine leaders decide, hey, God, this Yahweh, this God of the Hebrews, He just must not like the city of Ashdod, so let's move Him. So they moved Him to the city of Gat. They took the Ark of the Covenant and they took it out of the city of Ashdod. They moved it to the city of Gat. The same thing happens. Then they decide that we need to move this to the city of Ekron. They moved it to the third of their 5 great cities. And it says, and as the ark came to Ekron, the Ekronites cried out. I'm in verse 11. They cried out saying, they have brought the ark of the God of Israel around to us to kill us and our people. They knew that these hemorrhoids, this illness, this groinal condition was fatal in some cases, and they didn't want anything to do with it. So they said, the men who did, or it says that this ark was brought around to kill them, and the men who did not die from this illness that Yahweh brought on them, they were smitten with the tumors, and the cry of the city went up to heaven. This is about where we ended. So the Philistines learned, listen to what they learned through this. They know that Yahweh, the God of Israel, is doing this. This is their conclusion. Remember earlier, we can't tell the story, but they set the Ark of the Covenant before their God in their God's temple, their God named Dagon. They set the Ark of the Covenant there like a trophy before the victor Dagon. And over 2 days, Yahweh destroyed Dagon. He fell down 2 days in a row. The second day, his head and his hands were cut off of him. His authority and his power were gone. God is showing the Philistines, I am God. I created all. Worship me. But yet they don't. As we see here, the Philistines learn that Yahweh, the God of Israel, is sovereign. He has the authority over their God Dagon. They know that He's powerful. He's cut off the hands of Dagon. They also know that He's worthy to be worshipped. They know this. Yet they didn't worship Him. Instead, all they wanted was for Him to leave. Leave us so that we can get back to worshiping our false god, Dagon, who we had to rebuild last night, who we've got masons carving out a new statue. We want to continue worshiping the work of men's hands, this Dagon. You, Yahweh, are welcome to leave Philistia. Can you imagine such a thing? Yet in His grace, Yahweh allowed for this plague not to kill all of the Philistines. They recognized that God was in their presence. I want you to turn with me to Mark just for a minute. I want to show you a story here because the Bible also says that there's nothing new under the sun. Doesn't it say that? What happens here on earth just seems to keep happening, which is to say men don't learn from history. They repeat their mistakes over and over and over. And that the unbelieving heart in the presence of God, the recognized presence of God, instead of falling down to worship that God, many times men just say, leave us. Just leave. I don't want to be in your presence. I just want to show you a story here in Jesus' own life. I want you to see the parallels here. The Philistines recognized that God was in their presence. They were fearful of Him, and they wanted Him gone. Look at what it says in Mark chapter 5, verse 1. They came to the other side of the sea. This is Jesus in His ministry with His disciples. Jesus is what? God. And in the presence of God, I want you to see the reaction of men 1,000 years after 1 Samuel chapter 5. Look at what unbelieving men still conclude in the presence of the living God. Just leave us. They came to the other side of the sea. We're going to do this quickly, into the country of the Gerasenes. When He got out of the boat, this is Jesus the Savior. When He got out of the boat, immediately a man from the tombs with an unclean spirit met Him. Who's introduced so far? He is Jesus, and Jesus is what? He's God. Who else is introduced? A man with an unclean spirit. What's an unclean spirit? A demon. And who's in control of the demons? Satan. So who's battling who here? God versus Satan. What do we have in 1 Samuel chapter 5? Yahweh in the presence of the ark battling the false god Dagon, who is fueled by, of course, Satan. God, Satan, God, Satan, God, Satan. Right here on the scene. Jesus, God, the false spirit, the unclean spirit representing his father, Satan, or his leader at least. So Jesus gets out of the boat in this country of the Gerasenes, and a man from the tombs with an unclean spirit met him. He had his dwelling. It speaks of the man for a moment, this demon-possessed man. He had his dwelling among the tombs. No one was able to bind him anymore, even with a chain, because he had often been bound with shackles and chains. And the chains had been torn apart by him, and the shackles broken in pieces. This was an extremely strong man, made strong by the influence of the demon possession. He's got superhuman strength. They try to bind him with steel, and he just breaks the shackles. And it says in the last portion of verse 4, and no one was strong enough to subdue him. No mere man could gain control over this demon-possessed man. Listen to what I said. No mere man could control him in any way. But along comes who? The God-man, Jesus, the creator of all things, the creator of the unclean spirit, who was once an angel who fell with Satan and became a demon. It says in verse 5, continuing the conversation about the man, constantly night and day, he was screaming among the tombs and in the mountains and gashing himself with stones. Make no mistake, this demon possession, it still occurs today. There can still be people possessed by demons without question. The Antichrist that will one day come will be possessed by Satan himself. But demon possession is a desperate satanic attempt to distort and destroy God's image in man. That's why you have this man gashing himself, cutting himself, destroying his own body. Because what Satan wants from man is for God's image in man to be destroyed, at least distorted. And you see that here. And look what it says in verse 6. Now somebody tell me who's talking. You have Jesus, the God of heaven, incarnate in a human body, walking the earth. You have a man who's possessed by demons. Who speaks? In verse 6, seeing Jesus from a distance, he ran up and bowed down before him. And shouting with a loud voice, he bowed down in homage to an authority. He didn't bow down in worship. Let's not mistake this. But who's the one that's bowing? Who's in control of this man? Shouting with a loud voice, out of the vocal cords of this demon-possessed man, this is the sound. These are the words that come out. What business do we have with each other, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I implore you by God, do not torment me. Who's talking to Jesus? Is it the man? The man who's out of his mind, or is it the demon inside of him who's controlling him? Who's speaking? It's the demon. Who's this fight between? It's between God and Satan. It's between the forces of light and the forces of darkness. It's between the forces of good and the forces of evil. That's what this is showing, that God rules the angels, even the demons. Where no mere man could do anything to control this man, Jesus walks up and gains complete control because he created everything. So the demon shouts out to Jesus, and it's interesting. It's the same thing that's going on in 1 Samuel chapter 5. That's why we're here in 1 Samuel 6. That you have choices to make. You can either worship the living God or you can worship your false god Dagon, the unclean spirit type. Who will you choose? In verse 8, for he had been saying, so the demon is pleading with Jesus, I implore you, don't torment me. Because it says, for Jesus had been saying, come out of the man, you unclean spirit. And he was asking him. So Jesus asks the demon, not for Jesus' sake, he knew. But let's remember that Jesus, the man, wasn't omniscient. He learned the way we do. So there's some of that going on here. But Jesus asked him the question, what is your name? He asked the demon who's speaking to him. And the demon said to him, my name is Legion, for we are many, signifying that there's not only one demon in this man, he's possessed by several demons. A lot, as we're about to see. One more thing, go back to verse 7 just for a second. What does the demon call Jesus? Son of the Most High God. It's like that demon created by Jesus understands that Jesus is in fact the Son of God. He is the eternal Son of God, the second person of the Godhead. He's the Creator. He's the Son of El Elyon, the highest God there is. The demon knows exactly who he is. The demon recognizes that he is his authority. He is his creator, and that's what he calls him. And realize here that Jesus isn't begging the demon for everything. Jesus is making command. It's the demon who's begging Jesus. Who controls things? Of course, you know the answer. So he began to implore him earnestly not to send them out of the country. The demon is begging Jesus here not to send them out of the country. And it says in verse 11, there was a large herd of swine feeding nearby on the mountain. And the demons implored, they were begging Jesus, the authority, their creator, and they were saying to Jesus, send us into the swine so that we may enter them. What the demons don't want, don't miss this in the story, What the demons do not want is for Jesus, because he has the authority to do so, to send them to their final eternal resting place, torments, hell, the lake of fire. They want to be able to keep doing their work on earth of demon possessing and all their distortions of thought, etc. They don't want Jesus to cast them away forever. That's why they're imploring him, if you kick us out of the man, and you already have, we are leaving, you've commanded it, but let us go into the swine. So what does it say? Jesus gave them permission. Who's in charge? Well, Jesus is. God is. God the Son is in charge. And coming out, because they had to do what their authority said, the demons came out, and coming out, the unclean spirits entered the swine, and the herd of swine rushed down the steep bank into the sea, about 2,000 of them. Astounding number, isn't it? And they were drowned in the sea. The pigs were drowned, not the eternal demons. Demons don't die. They're eternal. But look at the response. We went through that part of the story to get to the response of man in the presence of the living God. Even if the man didn't understand who Jesus was, the demons made it perfectly clear. This man who healed you, this is the Son of the Most High God. This is God Himself. So it's made clear who Jesus is. Do the people respond? Do they fall on their knees before Jesus Christ and learn from Him and recognize Him as the Jewish Messiah? Or do they react and say, get away from us? Just like the Philistines are saying, get away from us. We recognize your authority. We recognize your power. We want nothing to do with you. How do the people respond? Do they respond in love and devotion and worship, or do they react and say, you're not for us. We know your strength. We saw what you've done. Leave us. That's exactly what they do. Look at the story. Their herdsmen ran away. The ones that were tending the pigs, minding their own business, all of a sudden, all their pigs run off the cliff. They went back into town to say, hey, that guy right there killed all of our income. I just saw it run off a cliff. That guy right there did this. So their herdsmen run away. They reported it in the city and in the country, and the people came to see what it is that had happened. And they came to Jesus. The choice of every man standing at the feet of Jesus Christ. They came to Jesus and they observed the man who had been demon-possessed. He was sitting down. He was clothed. He was in his right mind. Remember, part of what happens in Ashdod and Gath and Ekron was that they are fearful. They're losing their minds. This dreaded confusion God brought on them. But here's this demon-possessed man in his right mind, the very man who had had the legion of demons in him. And what's the reaction of the people? They became frightened. Not worshipful, fearful. It's an interesting reaction. It's the strangeness of the human mind. They know that Jesus has just won over Satan's demons. They see the crazy man who had this incredible demonic strength, who could break steel shackles off of his hands. They witness him cured. They know that this man Jesus did that. They know that this man Jesus has the power over the demons that were controlling that man. They see it. They know intellectually. They know who Jesus is. They have seen it, heard it, and now they're witnessing it. The demon-possessed man's in his right man. They can witness him for themselves. They can likely see the 2,000 pigs dead floating on the shore down under the cliff, right? You step out to the cliff and you look out and you say, yep, it happened just like the herdsman said. There are all the pigs. So they have all the intellectual knowledge. They have the knowledge to make the decision. Do we fall down before this man? Do we ask more questions of him? Why is it that he has power over the demons? Who is this? He must be God. But instead, they react fearfully and negatively. And listen, in the presence of the living God, all they can say is, leave us. In verse 16, those who had seen it described to them how it had happened to the demon-possessed man and all about the swine. They had first-hand knowledge of what happened, and they were on the scene now. And here was their reaction in verse 17. The strangeness of the human mind, the stubbornness of the human mind. Verse 17 says, and they began to implore him, just like the demons were begging Jesus not to send them to eternal torment. The people are now begging Jesus to leave their region. We don't want you here. You're not welcome here. In the presence of the living God, the best that these people could do, just like the people in Philistia, the best that unbelief could do here is wanting God to leave their presence. It says, and they began to implore him to leave their region. It's heartbreaking. How close can you be to perfection? You're in the presence of the living God, Jesus. You saw that this man has power, authority over the demons. And instead of thinking through this and grappling and wrestling with what you're understanding, what you're seeing, what you're witnessing, what you're being heard, instead of grappling with, could this be Messiah? In the presence of the living God, your only concern is being left alone because you're scared. Fearful. What they should have done is fall down and worship. They had all the information that they needed. The reason I keep harping this, it's not an intellectual problem, is because we look out on the world sometimes and we think, oh, men would believe. More men would believe if they just understood, if they just knew, if they just heard the story, if they heard the accounts of Jesus. They would have no choice but to believe it. True or false? It's false. You have the Philistines in 1 Samuel 5, 6, and 7. You have these people in this region of Israel, in the presence of the living God, before a miracle that has just taken place, they still say, you're not the one, we don't want you, leave our region. Astounding. It's just astounding to see how people react when God is in their presence. And that's exactly what's happened here. In the presence of the living God, the Philistines have decided, we don't want God here. We don't want this God who's more powerful than our God Dagon. We don't want this God who's shown himself to have more authority than our God Dagon. We don't want this God who has the power to inflict us personally in our groins. We don't want this God. We're not going to recognize him as the higher God, the highest God, El Elyon, God Most High. We're not going to recognize him at all. We are going to send him on his way. Get out of our presence. It's not an intellectual thing we deal with in the world. It's a spiritual problem. It's a spiritual problem. A lot of people understand who we claim Jesus is. They have the facts. They spiritually will not buy it. They don't believe it. For arrogance, for pride, for fear, for whatever reason, mankind won't accept Jesus as their Savior. Now, obviously, there are millions that don't know the name Jesus and need to know. But there are also billions who know the name Jesus who have no need for him. No time, no need, don't want to be in his presence, just leave. And that's exactly what you see here physically as Jesus is in the land. And they say, we don't need you, just leave. In chapter 6 of 1 Samuel, back in 1 Samuel chapter 6, we see the ark returned to Jerusalem, not to Jerusalem, but to Israel. The Philistines are fearful of the ark. They've decided we have to send it back. So the Philistines have to find out, how do we send a religious relic back? And so instead of going to the leaders of the civil leaders, right, the governors of the cities, they go to the spiritual leaders. They go to the people that know things about Dagon and false gods. And that's what we see here. All they want, they are not falling down in worship of Yahweh. All they want is for Yahweh's ark and Yahweh to leave them. So that's what we see here. The ark will come into the city of Beit Shemesh. Those people will get fearful of the ark. These are Jews. And they will move the ark to Kiryat Yerim, where it will stay for 20 years. 20 years. Until David goes to get the ark and bring it to the city of David, the ark will remain in this city, Kiryat Yerim, for 20 years. Now somebody has to be asking the question, why would it stay there? Why didn't they take it back to Shiloh, to the tabernacle? What must be the answer? Where does the Ark of the Covenant belong? In the Holy of Holies in the tabernacle in Shiloh, which is where the tabernacle had stood for almost 400 years. Why didn't they take it back to Shiloh? We don't have chapter and verse that says this, but the fact has to be that in this battle, the Philistines destroyed the city of Shiloh, at least temporarily, and took down the tabernacle. The tabernacle had to have been in disrepair here, or else they would have taken it back to its rightful place. But they didn't, and it stayed in Kiryat Yerim for 20 years. Shiloh had to have been dissolved to some extent, destroyed by the Philistine army. Remember, they killed 30,000 Jews in one day. They were a force, and Shiloh wasn't but 15 miles or so away from where they were. So that seems to be the answer to that. Verse 1 in 1 Samuel chapter 6 says, "Now the ark of the Lord," this is Yahweh, the ark of Yahweh, had been in the country of the Philistines for 7 months. So we find out exactly how long this moving around from Ashdod to Gath to Ekron, how long did all these tumors inflict the people of Philistia? For 7 months. It took them 7 months to come up with this plan. You'd think it would have been a little quicker. But nonetheless, 7 months is ample time to grapple with the all-important question, who really is God? Is it the God of the Hebrews represented by the Ark of the Covenant, or is it our God, Dagon, who fell twice at his feet? Who really is God? Who is it that we should be worshiping? They had 7 months to grapple with that question. Verse 2, the Philistines called for the priests and the diviners. Remember, not the 5 leaders of the cities this time. They don't need a civil judgment. They need a spirit. They need some religious information. How do you move a religious thing? If you were to move the statue of Dagon, how would you do it? That's the information they're looking for. We know this is a religious relic. It's a god. It associates with worship of a god. We know him as the only God, Yahweh, but they want to know from the priests, how can we properly move this to get us out of this pickle, to get these sores off of us, these hemorrhoids gone? What do we do? That's what's going on here. The Philistines called for the priests and the diviners, and they said, "What shall we do with the ark of the Lord? Tell us how we shall send it to its place." We don't know how to do this, but obviously we are handling it incorrectly. So in verse 3 it says, they said, the priests respond, this is how you should do this. If you send away the ark of the God of Israel, do not send it empty, but you shall surely return to him, Yahweh, a guilt offering. Send something with it. Then, after you do this, you will have appeased this offended God. If you send him his ark and you send him the guilt offering, you will have appeased God. His anger will come down. Then you will be healed, and it will be known to you why his hand is not removed from you. Then you'll realize we should have sent the ark back earlier. Yahweh's hands would have been removed from us. We'd have been healed of these hemorrhoids. So the guilt offering that the priest suggests here, return to him a guilt offering, was not a worship offering. This is pagan. They burned all kinds of stuff to their gods. They burned their children to their false gods. This was just the idea, the understanding, even in the pagan world, that you have to offer a god something when you've offended him. That's all this is. It was not worship of Yahweh as creator. Somebody tell me why. If the Philistines would have gotten the hint after 7 months that Yahweh is the God that is God, He's the only God, He's the only authority, He's the only power, it's not Dagon, it's the Hebrew God Yahweh we should be worshiping. If the Philistines would have come to that idea, they would not be sending the ark away like this. My notion is that they would have sought peace with the Israelites, realizing we've offended your God, and so we must have offended His people. They would have sought peace with Israel, and this whole idea that we're about to read about how to move the ark would have been a non-issue because Israel would have come back and gotten it. But that's not what you read here. So this is not about bowing down in worship of Yahweh, or else they would have sought peace with the Jews. It's not what's going on here. They just want this box gone. They want their hemorrhoids gone. They want to go back to normal, worshiping their false god Dagon as soon as possible. Get Yahweh out of here. How do we do it? How do we do it safely? And that's what the priests are telling him. If you send the box back, then you will be healed. It's as if here it seems like the religious leaders are making a pretty strong promise. Get rid of God, the Yahweh, and His ark, and you'll be healed of the hemorrhoids. Verse 4, it says, then they said to him, or they said, the people, having heard from the priests, you have to send a guilt offering. The obvious question is, what offering? And so they asked the priest, what shall be the guilt offering which we shall return to Yahweh? And the priest responded, 5 golden tumors. So make a mold of a hemorrhoid. A golden hemorrhoid. 5 golden tumors and 5 golden mice. Because this is how this illness is being spread. According to the number of the lords of the Philistines. Why 5? Because there are 5 lords of the Philistines, 5 major cities of Philistia, as we've talked about. That's why the number 5. Even though that ark only moved to 3 of those cities, all 5 of you need to send him something. For one plague was on all of you and on your lords. So the whole land of Philistia has been torn up by this hemorrhoid and groinal problem. It's all over. And so this is what the priests say. Verse 5, it says, so you shall make likenesses of your tumors. I wonder who the model was. This is just strange. The pagan mind is just so strange. Make likenesses of your tumors and likenesses of your mice that ravage the land, and you shall give glory to the God of Israel. Just homage as an authoritative God. This is not worship. You shall give glory to the God of Israel. Perhaps He will ease His hand from your gods, from you, your gods, and your land. So that idea that perhaps He will ease His hand from you and your gods. See, this is the priest saying, hey, wait a minute. Don't desert our gods. Don't desert the gods of Philistia for this God, which is what they should have done. In 7 months of understanding what had occurred, this is what they should have done. That's not what they're doing here. The Philistine priests are saying, no, our God Dagon stands. But this other God apparently has more authority, more power than Dagon, but if you send him away, let Dagon continue to be your gods. All we want is Yahweh's powerful hand to be taken off of our God. We don't want to stop worshiping our God. We certainly don't want to start worshiping their God. We don't want to stop worshiping our God. We want things back to normal. Send the ark back. Maybe this God will take His hand off of you physically. Your hemorrhoids will go away, and allow Dagon to rule our land again. That's what they want. They're still holding firm to Dagon. Verse 6 says, why then do you harden your hearts? The priests are still speaking. Why then do you harden your hearts as the Egyptians and Pharaoh hardened their hearts? They know Jewish history. And the idea from the priests here is Egypt was destroyed by this God. Don't stand up against this God. Just send him away. That's what the Egyptians did. They sent him out of their land and everything was better. They know Jewish history, but they're distorting it here. It says, why do you harden your hearts as Egypt and Pharaoh did when he had severely dealt with them? When Yahweh dealt with them severely, did they not allow the people to go and they departed? Send him on his way, and everything will be better. The Egyptians should have learned the lesson that this God, Yahweh, that caused the 10 plagues is the only God worthy of worship. They never got it. The Philistines, after 7 months, should have understood this is the God of heaven, the only God worthy of worship. They never got it. So all they picked up from the history of the war or the fighting, the plagues between Israel and Egypt is Israel was being destroyed by Yahweh. And once they got rid of Yahweh's people and everything Yahweh, things were better for Egypt. So that's what their thought is here. Just get rid of it. Verse 7. It says, now therefore take, this is their idea for moving the ark. You got to send it with 5 golden tumors and 5 golden mice, and this is how you shall send it. Now therefore take and prepare a new cart. I wonder if you remember how the Ark of the Covenant is to be moved. Is this the way it should be moved from place to place? Take and prepare a new cart and 2 milk cows, cows that are in milk, feeding their young, on which there has never been a yoke, so non-working cows, right? Not cows used to pulling a plow, or a cart, and take their calves home away from them. So what the priests are doing here is suggesting is totally stack the deck against the possibility that this will work. Do everything you can to make this an impossible event. Make a cart, put 2 cows on it, yoke them together, 2 cows that have never worked together. This will not work well. But yoke them as work cows, hook them to the cart, and even though they are in milk, and a mother cow would never leave her young that was in milk, that was feeding off of her, nursing off of her, separate the mother cow from her young. What's the mother going to do? Not going to be happy. Not going to want to leave her cows. No way is a female animal going to leave her young. But that's what they do. They totally stack the deck against this being a successful event. Let's see just how strong Yahweh is. And what they're about to find out, that Yahweh is the creator, and just like the stones that cried out, when no man will worship Yahweh, his creation still will. And who worships Yahweh on this day? 2 milk cows, as they abandon their young and carry that Ark of the Covenant back into the land of promise. The cows worshiping their Creator. People won't do it, but His creation always will. They're stacking the deck here, as I said. A cart is not how you move the Ark of the Covenant. We have to give the Philistines a break here because they don't know how to move the Ark. But I want to show you in a few verses as we close how that Ark was supposed to be moved. Gracious God. Remember in the time of David, let me push you forward in time a little bit. I told you that the Ark will stay in Kiryat Yearim for 20 years. Eventually David will go to get the Ark and bring it back into Jerusalem. Finally bring it into Jerusalem. David will go to pick up the Ark. Remember, David does a similar thing. He puts the Ark on a cart. And when they hit something, a rock, a bump in the road, the cart wiggled a little bit and the ark wiggled. And one of David's servants reached out. Remember, Uzziah, I think was the name, or Uzzah. Uzzah reached out and he touched the ark to stabilize the ark of God so that it wouldn't fall off the cart. And what did God do to him for touching his ark? He was dead on the spot. Because the Jews knew better. They had the Mosaic law. They should have known how to carry the ark. The Philistines don't know, so God shows them grace and allows them to put the ark on a cart. He didn't allow David to do it. Understand why? Because David had the law. David knew better. These people don't. He's a gracious God. Gracious. He gives leeway where leeway is needed. He's a gracious God. But how is the ark to be carried? Just a few verses as we close. It's to be carried by the Kohathites, the son of Levi. Levi had 3 sons, Gershon, Kohath, and Merari. And Kohath was the family of Levi that was put in charge of carrying the most holy things. There was a group that carried the coverings of the tabernacle. There was a group that carried the poles, all the woodwork. And there was a group that carried the holy items, the furniture. The menorah, the lampstand, the altar of incense, the table of showbread, and the Ark of the Covenant. Only the Kohathites could touch them. This is the work of the descendants of Kohath. We read in Numbers chapter 4, verse 4. This is the work of the descendants of Kohath in the tent of meeting, the tabernacle, concerning the most holy things, the furniture. When the camp sets out, Aaron and his sons shall go in, and they shall take down the veil of the screen and cover the ark of testimony with it. Remember, I told you that no man was to lay eyes on the ark except for the high priest. And here's what you see here. You have Aaron the high priest and his sons, the high priests. When it's time to move the tabernacle, they go in and cover the Ark of the Covenant. The next verse says this, they shall lay a covering of porpoise skin on it and shall spread over it. We're talking about the Ark of the Covenant, this 45-inch long box. They shall lay a covering of porpoise skin on it and shall spread over it a cloth of pure blue, and then shall insert its poles. It's carrying poles that would slide through rings in the 4 corners of the ark. You put the poles through it. You put 4 men on the poles. They all lift up at the same time, kind of like a casket, like the bearers of a casket would lift up a casket. That's the way they were to hold the Ark of the Covenant, by its poles. They never even could touch the box. So when the Ark of the Covenant was in motion, what should you see? Read that verse and tell me, what color should you see when the Ark of the Covenant was in motion? Blue. Nothing but blue. That's not the way the Philistines would carry it. That's not the way David would carry it later. When Aaron, in verse 15 of the same chapter, when Aaron and his sons have finished covering the holy objects, so everything was to be covered, all 4 of the items, when they had finished covering the holy objects and all the furnishings of the sanctuary, so we're talking about the altar, the basin, everything that was out there. When the camp is to set out, after that, the sons of Kohath, only Kohath, shall come to carry them, so that they will not touch the holy objects and die. That's why Uzzah, when he reached out to touch the holy object, he died, because the Mosaic law said, you can't touch it. Not even the sons of Kohath, who are in charge of moving it, can touch the box itself. That's how holy, set apart to God, these items were. If they touch them, they will die. These are the things in the tent of meeting which the sons of Kohath are to carry. And then in verse 19, a few verses later, it says, but do this to them that they may live and not die when they approach the most holy objects. Aaron and his sons shall go in and assign each of them to his work and to his load. But they shall not go in to see the holy objects, even for a moment, or they will die. If someone wanted to peek inside that box, underneath that blue, underneath that porpoise skin, God says, you will instantly die. No exceptions. So when the Ark of the Covenant was in motion, it was carried like this, and all the people of Israel could see was blue. Carried like this, a couple of renditions of the Ark in motion. They would sing with trumpets. You can see the priest in the front. This was a joyous event. They all had their shofars, their ram's horn blasting out music. I'm sure there were singers along. It was a joyous event when the ark moved. This is a picture of what? Can you tell? It's Jericho. It's Jericho. It's the walls of Jericho falling down with the city in the back, the light city and tan in the background. The walls are crumbling and all that black and gray coloring as the ark is carried around the city. But I love this picture because they got it right. The ark was covered in blue. No eye ever saw that. Only the eye of the high priest one day a year. Or when God had deemed it was a day to move the ark, move the tabernacle. That's how it should have been moved. What we see in the pages of 1 Samuel chapter 6 is a picture more like this, where the 5 lords of the Philistines will follow the ark and watch where it goes. You have these 2 cows that are in milk. Interesting that they got that right. Hard to tell there, but look at their udders expanded, full of milk, ready to milk their calves that have been taken from them. Wonderful depiction. You've got the Philistine lords following because they want to know, is Yahweh in control of this or not? You've got the Ark of the Covenant there being carried incorrectly, and you have this little golden box. What's in the box? 5 golden tumors, 5 golden mice. The guilt offering that they would send back to send the ark back in to Yahweh. Maybe He will be appeased if we send Him this guilt offering. Again, the Philistines don't know how to carry this box. And even though many Philistines touched it, lifted it, moved it, put it on a cart, probably steadied it as the cart was moving, God showed grace. We don't have a God that just pounds down on everybody for the first thing they do wrong. This is a gracious, merciful God trying to get the attention of people that were made in His image and in His likeness, the Philistines. Why don't you bow down and worship me today? But yet they wouldn't. But He shows them great grace and great mercy in allowing them to send the ark back in this way. We'll pick up here next time and see just where it ends up. Let's close in prayer. Father,